There's a moment in Revenge of the Sith, and if you've seen the film, you already know the one. Padme is gone. Anakin Skywalker's just been told, and for a split second, you can watch a human being disappear, and not because he dies, but because he realizes everything he became, everything he destroyed, and everything he sacrificed was for nothing. He betrayed his brothers, he slaughtered his children, and he surrendered his soul to save Padme. But she died anyway. Now, most people believe that this is a story of a man who wanted power and wanted all of it. But I don't. I think, like last week, we'll see something a little better right here. I think this is more of a story of a little boy who never learned how to lose the people he loved. And if you get down to it, I think that's what makes this story a little more terrifying. Because almost nobody watching this episode knows what it's like to crave unlimited power, but almost everybody knows what it's like to fear losing someone. Welcome back to Dark Margins, everyone. This week's case file is about Anakin Skywalker. If you remember in the last episode, we opened Season 2 by talking about Bruce Wayne. We talked about a child who watched his parents die and then spent the rest of his life trying to make sure no one could ever make anyone else feel that helpless again. So as we neared the end of the episode, we talked about Bruce Wayne and his obsession became armor. And if you think about it, Anakin Skywalker begins in almost the same place. A frightened little boy, a childhood wound, and a promise to himself. But where Bruce Wayne built walls, Anakin Skywalker built chains. Bruce believed, if I'm strong enough, no one can hurt me again. Anakin believed, if I'm strong enough, no one I love will ever leave me again. Those sound almost identical, but they're not. One is an obsession with control, the other is an obsession with loss. And today we're going to investigate one of the oldest questions in psychology. Why do some people love until love becomes possession? Why does devotion slowly become control? And at what point does trying to save someone become the very thing that destroys them? Psychologist John Bowlby, whose work laid the foundation for modern attachment theory, believed our earliest relationships become the blueprint for how we experience love, loss, trust, and separation for the rest of our lives. Now, if Bowlby is right, then Darth Vader wasn't born on Mustafar, he was born on Tatooine. Now let's go over this. Before there was Padme or Obi-Wan or the Jedi, there was only one person, Shmi Skywalker. Most people remember that Anakin was a slave. I don't think that's the most important part of his childhood. The most important part is that inside a world built on cruelty, his mother somehow convinced him he was loved, completely, unconditionally. For 9 years, she was his entire world. Then the Jedi arrived, and they asked a little boy to do something no child should ever have to do. Leave his mother behind. Forever. Before we go any further, let's think about how amazing this movie was. If it's been a few years since you watched Revenge of the Sith, watch it again. Not just because it's a Star Wars movie, but because it's one of the greatest modern tragedies. You gotta realize that more than 20 years after its release, audiences were still packing theaters to see it again. A film that has earned over $900 million worldwide didn't endure because of lightsaber duels or special effects alone. It endured because people connected with the tragedy at its center. And when you do watch it again, watch Hayden Christensen's face, watch McGregor's heartbreak, watch every decision that feels justifiable in the moment until suddenly you're watching the birth of Darth Vader. And then ask yourself one question. What if this was never a story about the dark side? What if it was a story about grief? Let's go back to John Bowlby for a second. This man spent decades studying moments exactly like this. His research suggests that when children experience profound separation from the person they depend on the most, the loss doesn't simply become a memory, it actually becomes a template. It's a quiet belief about how relationships work. For some, that belief becomes, people come back. For others, it becomes, everyone I love eventually leaves. Now, fast forward 10 years. Anakin returns, and not to rescue his mother, and not to save the day, but to arrive just a few moments too late. His mother, Shmi, dies in his arms. And in that moment, every fear he carried as a little boy is confirmed. The people you love can be taken, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Last week, when we talked about Bruce Wayne and childhood trauma, we introduced a psychiatrist named Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. He was born in the Netherlands in 1943, while the Netherlands was still under Nazi occupation. His father was actually sent to a Nazi labor camp, and his childhood unfolded in a nation trying to recover from unimaginable trauma. And Dr. Bessel van der Kolk would spend the next 50 years asking a single question. What does trauma do to us, and why does it continue shaping our lives long after the moment itself has passed? His answer became one of the most influential books on trauma that's ever been written. It's titled The Body Keeps Score, and one of the central ideas from his work is this: trauma doesn't simply become part of your past, it becomes the way you experience your future. Now, keep that thought in the back of your mind, because I think it explains Anakin Skywalker better than almost anything else we're going to discuss today. And it's because I don't think Anakin left that desert with revenge in his heart. He left with a promise. And that promise was, never again. Never again will I stand helpless while someone I love is taken from me. Now think about this. Every obsession begins with a promise. But unfortunately, sometimes the promise that saves a child is the same promise that destroys the man. Now let's get back to the film. Anakin leaves Tatooine, but unfortunately Tatooine never leaves Anakin. And that distinction matters, because escaping the place where you were wounded doesn't mean escaping the wound. Van der Kolk's work suggests that trauma is not stored only as a memory, but it can become a state of expectation. The danger may be gone, but the body continues preparing for its return. And Anakin has spent his entire childhood learning that safety can disappear without warning. Now, if you remember, Anakin was born into slavery, and a device was placed inside his body to prevent escape. His future belonged to whoever happened to own him. And the one person who made that life bearable was his mother. Shmi wasn't simply someone Anakin loved. She was the only source of safety he had ever known. Then, at 9 years old, he's forced to leave her behind. The Jedi free Anakin, but they didn't free Shmi. And so the greatest opportunity of his life begins with the greatest abandonment of his childhood. Anakin's told that he's been chosen, that he has extraordinary gifts, that he may become one of the most powerful Jedi who has ever lived. But somewhere beneath all of that promise is a little boy wondering whether his mother is still alive. And for 10 years, Anakin carries that uncertainty. And then the dreams begin. He sees Shmi suffering. He feels that something's wrong. The Jedi tell him to release his fear. But as you and I both know, fear is not a switch, and trauma is not persuaded by philosophy. Anakin eventually returns to Tatooine and discovers that his nightmares were not irrational. They were warnings. He finds his mother tortured, barely alive, and tied inside a Tusken camp. After 10 years apart, Anakin reaches Shmi Skywalker just in time to watch her die in his arms. Not before he gets there, and not after, but while he's holding her. He spent his whole life being told he's special, powerful, chosen, and none of it is enough to save the person who once saved him. In that moment, the child inside Anakin receives confirmation of everything he's always feared. The people you love can be taken from you. You can even see it coming, and you can fight with everything you have. But you can still arrive a little too late. Now, if you've seen the movie, you realize that what happens next isn't justice. Anakin walks out of that tent and massacres the Tusken camp, and not just the warriors who tortured his mother, but the women, the children, everyone. If you've been with us in Season 1, you've seen this pattern before. Edmond Dantes sought revenge against the people who betrayed him, and Amy Dune sought revenge against the husband who humiliated her. Their vengeance, however twisted, remained focused on the people they believed had wronged them. But sometimes, the obsession for revenge crosses that line. We saw it with Medea and Atreus. With Medea, we saw that Jason betrayed her, but her children did not. Yet the children became the victims. With Atreus, his brother wronged him, but his brother's children paid the price. When innocent people become acceptable collateral damage, revenge is transformed into something else. It's no longer justice or retribution, but cruelty and evil. Anakin crosses that line in the sands of Tatooine. The Tusken warriors murdered his mother, but the children didn't, the women didn't, yet they die all the same. This is the first moment Anakin stops asking who deserves punishment and starts believing that overwhelming violence can silence unbearable pain. And we know that it can't, but for a few terrible minutes, it convinces Anakin that it can. And that's the moment the path to Darth Vader truly begins. So let's get back to the movie. Shmi's still dead, the camp's silent, and Anakin must live with what he's done. And when he confesses this to Padme, he doesn't sound victorious. He actually sounds horrified. He knows the massacre was wrong. He knows it violated everything the Jedi taught him. And he knows it violated something inside himself. "I'm a Jedi," he tells her. "I know I'm better than this." That line right there is important. The darkness hasn't yet convinced Anakin that murder's good. His moral awareness is still intact, but in the moment of crisis, his pain becomes stronger than his principles. Then Anakin stands beside his mother's grave and makes a promise. "I won't fail again." Now, it sounds like devotion. It sounds like a grieving son honoring his mother. But hidden inside that promise is the belief that will eventually destroy him. Anakin decides that Shmi's death was his failure. Not the failure of the people who enslaved her, and not the failure of the Jedi who left her behind, and not even the cruelty of the people who tortured her. But his failure. He wasn't fast enough or strong enough or powerful enough, and so he makes himself responsible for something no human being can control. Death. From this moment forward, losing someone will no longer mean that tragedy occurred. It will mean that Anakin failed to prevent it. That's the promise he carries away from his mother's grave. And years later, when he begins dreaming of Padme dying, he's not seeing a new fear, he's reliving the old one. Only this time, Anakin believes he knows what the dream means. It means he's running out of time again. It means someone he loves is going to die again. And it also means that unless he becomes powerful enough, he will fail again. Trauma teaches Anakin what to fear. But fear alone doesn't create Darth Vader. Something else must happen. Anakin must begin believing that love gives him the right and the responsibility to control what happens next. Psychologist Robert Vallerand has spent years studying the difference between two forms of passion. One enriches a person's life, the other begins to consume it. Vallerand calls the first harmonious passion. It exists when someone loves deeply, but that love remains part of a larger identity. The person can choose when to engage with it. They can also remain capable of stepping back, capable of accepting limits, capable of remaining themselves. The second form is obsessive passion. This begins when the passion stops being something a person possesses and becomes something that possesses them. The person no longer chooses it freely. Their self-worth becomes attached to it, their identity becomes dependent on it, and anything that threatens the object of that passion begins to feel like a threat on the self. And it's here where Anakin's love for Padme begins to change. At first, it feels recognizable. He misses her, he admires her, he wants to be near her. But Anakin has never learned how to love without fear. He lost his mother once when he left Tatooine. Then he lost her again when she died in his arms. So when Anakin falls in love with Padme, he doesn't simply experience affection, he experiences danger. Every moment of closeness contains the possibility of another separation. Every happiness carries an expiration date. And because the Jedi forbid attachment, Anakin can't bring that fear into the open. His marriage must remain secret. His anxiety must remain private. The most important relationship in his life exists in hiding. Now, since there's no community around them, there's no one to notice when his fear becomes unhealthy and no one to challenge the belief that Padme's survival is now his responsibility. The Jedi teach Anakin to let go, but they never truly teach him how to grieve. They tell him that death is natural, that those who die return to the Force, attachment leads to jealousy, that fear of loss leads to the dark side. And philosophically, they may be right, but Anakin doesn't hear the wisdom. He only hears the same message he heard as a child. And that message is, a person you love may be taken, and what you're expected to do is just accept it. But that's something he can't do. Then the nightmares return. This time, Anakin sees Padme dying in childbirth. The images resemble the visions he had of his mother, and those earlier visions came true. And it's that detail that changes everything. Anakin's not merely afraid that Padme might die, he believes he's already been shown that she will. And the last time he ignored a warning, he arrived too late. This is why reassurance cannot reach him. Padme tells him she's fine. The Jedi tell him to release his fear. But Anakin has evidence. His mind connects the two events. He dreamed of Shmi died, and now he dreams of Padme, therefore Padme'll die. And if he does nothing, he'll be responsible again. This is where love crosses into obsession. Anakin no longer asks what Padme wants. He doesn't ask her whether she believes the visions. And he no longer asks whether she wants him to risk everything searching for forbidden power. Her life becomes a problem for him to solve. Her survival becomes proof of his worth. And her possible death becomes an accusation against him. Anakin believes he's acting entirely for Padme. But the deeper truth is more complicated. He's also trying to save himself from experiencing Shmi's death for a second time. He's trying to rescue the child who knelt helplessly in that tent. And finally, he's trying to prove that he's no longer powerless. That is why ordinary solutions will never satisfy him. Medical care's not enough, hope's not enough, and trust isn't enough. Anakin doesn't want the possibility that Padme will survive. He wants certainty. He wants authority over death itself. And when love demands certainty, it begins demanding control. This is the contradiction at the center of Anakin Skywalker. He wants to save Padme because he loves her, but in refusing to accept her freedom, her judgment, and even the natural limits of life, his love begins erasing her. Padme becomes less of a person and more of a symbol. She's a woman he loves, the mother of his child, but she's also his chance to correct the past. If Padme lives, then perhaps Shmi's death doesn't define him. Perhaps he's powerful enough after all. Perhaps he can finally keep the promise he made at his mother's grave. I won't fail again. That promise now governs him. And the problem with impossible promises is that eventually they demand impossible sacrifices. Anakin begins hiding more, distrusting more, resenting more. He feels that the Jedi are withholding knowledge from him. He feels that the Council doesn't respect his power. He feels that Obi-Wan doesn't understand him. And beneath every grievance is the same conviction. They are standing between him and the power he needs to save Padme. Once Anakin believes that, anyone who limits him begins to look like an enemy. The Jedi are no longer mentors cautioning him against corruption. They're obstacles. Their rules are no longer safeguards, they're chains. Their warnings are no longer expressions of concern. They're proof that the Order wants to keep him weak. And this is what obsession does. It narrows the world. It reduces every question to one objective. Every person becomes either useful or dangerous. Every principle becomes negotiable. Every boundary becomes injustice. And every compromise becomes acceptable. And this is all because the person believes the outcome will justify it. Anakin's obsession doesn't begin with hatred, it begins with love. But it's not pure love, it's love transformed by terror. He doesn't want Padme beside him as a free person whose future he cannot control. He needs her to remain alive because he can't survive what losing her would mean about him. That's the opening Palpatine has been waiting for. Trauma taught Anakin what to fear, and obsession convinced him that fear must be controlled. And now, someone's going to offer him the power to do it. Palpatine doesn't create Anakin's fear, he studies it. He doesn't place the wound inside him, he learns where it is. And then, very carefully, he presses against it. That is what makes Palpatine dangerous. He doesn't create Anakin's fear, he simply recognizes it. The Jedi tell Anakin to let go, but Palpatine tells him there's another way. And it's not because Palpatine cares about Padme, and it's not because he even cares about Anakin. He just realizes that a frightened man is far easier to control than a peaceful one. So, he tells Anakin a story. A Sith Lord so powerful he could prevent the people he loved from dying. Now notice what Palpatine doesn't do. He never tells Anakin to become evil, he simply offers hope. If there's even the slightest chance that Padme can be saved, how could Anakin walk away? But that's the trap. Because once Anakin believes Palpatine may hold the answer, everyone standing between him and Palpatine begins to look like an obstacle, even the Jedi. And there's a point in the movie that Mace Windu confronts Palpatine, and Anakin makes the decision that changes everything. Anakin intervenes. Mace Windu dies. And with one swing of his lightsaber, Anakin convinces himself there's no way back. That belief is one of the oldest lies evil ever tells. If you've already crossed the line, you might as well keep walking. Minutes later, Anakin kneels before Palpatine, and not because he hates the Jedi or loves the dark side, but because he believes this is the only path left that might save Padme. Gotta admit, the irony's heartbreaking. Everything Anakin does is to prevent losing the person he loves, and every decision pushes her farther away. He lies to her, he frightens her, he isolates her. He chooses power over trust, control over compassion, and fear over love. By the time Obi-Wan confronts him on Mustafar, the transformation is already complete. When Padme begs him to leave, Anakin hears betrayal. When Obi-Wan tries to reason with them, he hears judgment. The man who once feared losing everyone he loved now believes everyone he loves has turned against him. And that right there is what obsession does. It narrows the world until only one voice remains. And if that voice belongs to the wrong person, everything else becomes the enemy. Anakin loses the duel, his body's destroyed, Padme dies. The very future he sacrificed everything to prevent still happens. Then comes one of the cruelest moments in cinema. Palpatine tells him Padme is dead. Not because the Jedi killed her, and not because Obi-Wan murdered her, because of him. The one thing Anakin spent his entire life trying to prevent was brought about by his own choices. And that's the tragedy. Darth Vader was never created by hate. He was created by fear. Fear of loss, grief, failing the people he loved. Which brings us back to the question we asked at the beginning. At what point does passion become obsession? Perhaps it's the moment love stops saying, "I want what's best for you," and starts saying, "I can't survive without you." Because the moment another person becomes responsible for completing us, or protecting us, or giving our life meaning, love quietly becomes possession. And possession always demands control. Anakin Skywalker never stopped loving. He simply became so terrified of losing love that he destroyed himself. Because we know that the Force didn't fail him, or the Jedi didn't fail him, and we know beyond a reasonable doubt that love didn't fail him. But it was fear that failed him. And maybe that's why this story still resonates nearly 50 years later. Because very few of us will ever wield a lightsaber, but every one of us will someday face the temptation to control what was only ever ours to cherish. Now let's take a moment and go over the case file for Anakin Skywalker. If you remember from the last episode starting off in Season 2, we're going to start doing this with every single file. We're going to go over the wound, the promise, the obsession, the shadow, the cost, and the verdict. So, here it is for Anakin Skywalker. The wound was a little boy learned that everyone he loved could be taken from him. His promise was, "I won't fail again." The obsession was, if he became powerful enough, no one he loved would ever die again. And that created the shadow, and that was, the more he tried to control death, the more death controlled him. And that led to the cost. He became the very thing he feared. The man who wanted to save the people he loved became the one who destroyed them. The verdict is Anakin Skywalker wasn't consumed by hatred. He was consumed by belief that love could survive without letting go. And that is case closed. Now, in the next episode, we'll meet a man who only wanted to leave something behind for his family. But somewhere along the way, he stopped asking how much is enough and started asking how much more. If you haven't subscribed, do so because this story's only getting started. I'm Bobby Garrison, and this is Dark Margins. I'll see you in the next episode.